And greetings to you. I especially want to give my greetings to church members of the Ferntree Gully and Glen Huntly Seventh-day Adventist churches. Hope your week has gone well. I'd also like to give my greetings to anybody else who's watching this video as well. Thank you all for taking the time to view this video. Well, the last couple of years of the pandemic has made some profound changes in our lives, hasn't it? It's changed the way of how we school our children, how we work, how we shop, how we interact with friends and loved ones, and yes, even how we grow spiritually. Now, some changes we've made, we've actually liked and would like to continue even when the pandemic and lockdowns are over. But other changes, of course, we can't wait until they are finished with. If nothing else, the pandemic has given us an opportunity to reflect on our lives and to actually evaluate some of the things we used to uncritically accept as normal before the pandemic. Maybe you've even thought to yourself that a new normal will be better than the normal before the pandemic. I'd like to share with you at this time a New Year's or a Jewish New Year's message recorded just this past September. In it, the rabbi has a bit of a unique take on what the year ahead for you could be like in light of the biblical teaching of the Shemitah Year. Now you're probably asking, what is a Shemitah Year and how can it help me in the year ahead? Well, have a look at this video. I'm sure it'll be very thought-provoking, and I'll see you at the end for a closing thought.
I'm a city person. I love theater. I hate driving, and I feel most at home amid the cacophony and chaos of this amazing place. But as often as I can, I hightail it out of here and head to my family's house in Connecticut, where, as my children will tell you, there is absolutely nothing to do. When we bought the place, we were inspired by some combination of frugality and laziness to allow the side yards to grow wild. And now these untamed fields are my favorite places. There are stands of milkweed and wildflowers, and at night the whole yard vibrates with the sounds of crickets and frogs and who knows what else. Creating this beautiful landscape was actually incredibly difficult for me because it required me to do nothing. Doing nothing doesn't come naturally to me, nor, I suspect, to most of you. That's why once every 7 years, in fact, this year, the one we just started yesterday, the Torah demands that both we and the land take a sabbatical. In Hebrew, it's called a Shemitah Year, a year of release. In Leviticus, God tells Moses, 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes from your untrimmed vine. But you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce. So for 6 years, the Israelites were supposed to work the land, but the 7th year, they were commanded to sit back and see what happens. God acknowledges how scary this is. God says, you might ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year? The answer, I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year, so that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3. The Shemitah year is Shabbat brought to scale. Instead of merely pausing from work for 1 day out of 7, it calls upon all of us to pause for an entire year with faith in God's promise that if we do so, we will find that we have enough and even be satisfied. This commandment is radical and wildly impractical. In fact, Maimonides hints that we might not fully observe the Shemitah until the Messiah comes. But as audacious as it sounds, Shmita invites us to imagine a world where we do not see the earth simply as fuel for our own advancement and productivity. Instead, we wait to receive the blessings that nature will bestow on us in its own time. In the book of Deuteronomy, God promises the Israelites a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey where you will lack nothing. This comes with a warning, however. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and everything you own has prospered, beware, lest your heart grow haughty, and you say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hands have won this wealth for me. Instead, they are to recognize that the land belongs to God, and whatever abundance they have produced is not really theirs at all. Even the skills they use in fostering this bounty are God-given. Shmita comes every 7 years to remind us of this lesson in humility. Because in the Shemitah year, we find that even without our effort, things still grow. There might not be grain, but the trees bear fruit, and vegetables emerge from seeds that fell last year. And in a Shemitah year, everyone is allowed to wander into the fields and see what has grown where they least expect it. I think it's safe to say that most of us, except for maybe a few of our live streamers, are not farmers. The domain of our productivity lies not in those squares of green or gold that we see when we look out the window from an airplane, but rather in the squares that lie within the boundaries of our calendars. Like farmers testing the latest fertilizer, we try out time management apps and productivity tools to optimize our yield. We schedule ourselves for back-to-back Zoom meetings. We bill our time in 6-minute increments. We listen to audiobooks while we are exercising so that we can check 2 boxes at once. We are a society running on fumes, whether they be the industrial fertilizer in our fields or the caffeine in our coffee. So what if during this Shemitah year, we just stopped? Impossible, right? As I said that, did you feel your stomach clench? Did you feel your chest get tight? I did. We live in a nonstop culture of achievement, so it's easy to believe that our efforts alone sustain us, and if we stop, everything will fall apart. We are so used to white-knuckling it through life that the prospect of letting go seems impossible. If it were easy, we wouldn't need a commandment. But as Rabbi David Ingber teaches, something miraculous happens when we stop. We get to experience the power that nature knows called dormancy. There are seeds inside each and every one of us that cannot emerge because we forget that resting does not mean disappearing. Some of us, mainly those of us without small children at home, may have felt we already had our Shemitah year. No commute, no busy social calendar. We woke up early for meditation with Rabbi Buckdahl. We made pickles with Rabbi Lorge. We were home to see our challah rise. Before your calendars fill up again, ask yourselves, what grew in the empty spaces? And which of those things will you continue to cultivate this year? Others found themselves overemployed. We were tethered to Zoom while caring for children who were feeling anxious and isolated and depressed. You may be sitting here asking, what about the grants that didn't get written, the jobs I couldn't apply for? Thinking, is this really the year for doing nothing? Yes. Our tradition tells us that in the face of the exhaustion and depletion that we are feeling right now, a year of doing nothing is exactly what we need. In her book, How to Do Nothing, the artist Jenny Odell offers us a roadmap for resisting what she calls the attention economy. The ubiquitous sense in our modern lives that we must also always be doing and producing and responding. She advocates for replacing FOMO, the fear of missing out, with NOMO, the necessity of missing out. She teaches that access to time and space in which to do nothing is necessary for us to think, reflect, heal, and sustain ourselves and the world around us. To be clear, this is not a life hack. As Odell writes, the point of doing nothing isn't to return to work refreshed and ready to be more productive, but rather to question what we currently perceive as productive. Think of someone you love who has retired. Did they become less worthy because they are less productive? No, and you won't either. Making a commitment to do nothing does not mean abandoning our commitment to repair the world. But at a time when so much suffering is caused by thoughtless and reactionary responses to the latest media cycle, silence can be an act of resistance. When you leave here today, I invite you to look at your calendars and find at least one slot that you will allow to lie fallow. An hour on Monday mornings or 15 minutes each night after the kids are in bed. Promise yourself that you will not use that space for anything productive. No chores, no catching up. Just allow that piece of your life to rest and see what takes root of its own accord. If you have children, give them some time back too. As Dr. Betsy Stone suggests, too often we try to control every outcome for our kids. Observing Shmita means getting out of the way. It means pausing and releasing our grip on the future and asking ourselves, what if I just sat and didn't do anything? Who might they become? Do you need a more active way to do nothing? Take a walk. But if you do, promise me that you'll leave your Fitbit behind. And no catching up on a podcast. Instead, allow yourself to daydream. Look with soft fascination at the world around you and see what reveals itself. I will also be creating some opportunities for us to do nothing together. As the rabbi in charge of adult programming, I can't wait to do nothing with you this year. They say every rabbi gives the sermon they most need to hear, and that is certainly true for me. Every once in a while, someone will ask, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten? And my go-to is always something that I learned from my friend John. After we graduated law school, I saw John go from one high-powered job to another. So one day I asked him, how do you keep getting all these jobs? And he said, if someone asks you if you can do something, just say yes. By the time you need to do it, you'll figure it out. I tried it, and sure enough, it works. For years, I have approached opportunities with a default answer of yes. The good news is that I've gotten to do things I never would have gotten to do if I'd said no. The bad news is it is exhausting. It turns out nonstop productivity is no better for the soul than it is for the land. I'm not prepared to ditch John's advice forever. I think it's really good, at least 6 years out of 7. But maybe this is the year for saying no. What if the default answer to every 7th invitation or opportunity this year was no? Just for this year. What might that leave room for? I imagine that some of you are here thinking, Rabbi, the last thing I need is more quiet. If your calendar has grown too empty this year, if you're feeling isolated and stagnant, remember that part of the Shemitah year is about feeling free to explore. So go out there and be curious. There is a term in Hebrew for learning that is not done with any practical aim in mind. It's called Torah lishma, learning for its own sake. So read a book that will not come in handy. Take up a hobby that is useless but delightful. Extra points if you're bad at it. If we can embrace this year of release, then when we meet again next September, we might just find that the world has survived without our extra busyness. We might also find that we are satisfied. For that is God's promise when God decrees the sabbatical year. If we can stop working so hard, we just might find that what we need to sustain us is already here. All we need to do is slow down enough to discover it.
Quite a good message, isn't it? I think we can all relate to the need to sometimes saying no so that we can spend some time in just being alone and being more reflective and see what God would like to do in us and through us. I must admit, I'm guilty of relentlessly looking for life hacks and apps to make me more productive, without actually spending much time to think about if what I am doing is actually worthwhile in God's sight. We don't have to take a Shemitah year off in order to do this and reflect more, as the rabbi suggested. We can take some time out every week to just spend time being alone and considering what God might want to do in us and through us. I'd like to have a prayer with you now at this time. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Dear Father, I just thank you that you are a God who cares, you are a God who cares what we do, and you are a God who wants us to do what is best for us. Dear Father, our lives are so busy, and COVID has given us a chance to reflect a little bit on our lives and what a new normal might look like. Dear Father, I pray for the viewer as they reflect on their lives, as they maybe spend some time, more time with you, and just see what you can do in a year when we don't control ourselves so much. So I just pray, Father, you'll be with us, be with the viewer, Father, that we can have a better new normal ahead. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, this week I don't have a music video for you. Instead, I'd like you to spend some time maybe reflecting on the message and what you might be able to do to have a better year ahead, and maybe even put some time in your diary to have some time with God and reflect. So anyway, till next week, God bless, and have a good Shemitah year. Bye for now.